acceptance in installations throughout the world. 41 wind farms in 9 different countries, 5 continents so far, and protecting for over 650 turbines so far. It's always increasing. And we're deployed in a myriad of different environments. Here's an installation in Tasmania. This is in Utah. You see, obviously we can handle winter conditions, everything. Well, the power needs that I was mentioning before. We actually do need some power because, well, we have a processor, but the biggest need for power is the winter time to make sure that our viewports don't freeze up. So we have to be able to always be able to see birds. So we have to have heaters that prevent from any icing events. This is our newest installation going on right as we speak in Uzbekistan. It's a very large installation, so 500 megawatts, so it's about 110 turbines for which we're protecting. And this gives you an idea of kind of the installation. We get power from the transformer at the base of the turbine. There's some trenching that goes on that provides power, and very importantly, of course, the network connectivity that allows us control all the turbines to be able to curtail them and in time and so on. Here's a really busy slide, but mostly what we want to show you with this is our path in technology development and how that continues to evolve and our plans for the future. So we're here today, 2024. We're up to our version 5 evolution of the technology, and along the way here you can see the list of species that we're protecting continues to increase. Today we're actually, this doesn't even cover the full list, it's 31 species, and Susan will go into a lot more detail about those species soon, shortly here. And then V6 is expanding to offshore applications and nighttime applications where we're looking for migratory passerines, bats, bat movement through nearshore installations, and any species that could be, in danger doing nighttime activities. And so the progression, so if you, the video, I was hoping that the video can give you a sense of the scale and the challenges with it, developing the technology such as this, and how important it is for the technology to be able to deal with almost an unlimited number of variables in an uncontrolled environment, right? So to do that, we incorporate artificial intelligence, machine learning into almost every aspect of the technology. And I was talking about motion sensing. The system needs to be able to learn its environment because there's always things moving out there. There's a branch shaking over here, there's a turbine in the distance. The system is always learning that. It's adapting for what the environment is, how the environment is changing around it, so that it can then focus on the birds and pick out the birds and not be distracted by other things. And of course, with the species identification, which Susan will show you in more detail, that's a long list here, the ability to distinguish different similar-looking birds from each other. You all are probably birders, so you know how tricky that can be, right? And Susan will show you several examples where we're definitely being challenged. But it's a phenomenal use of machine learning, artificial intelligence. It's a great application of it. It's right here, and it's sort of it's showing tremendous results. So going back to our history here, so we started down here, and initially we were able to provide protection levels for golden eagles and bald eagles in North America, a protection rate of about 95% when we first started. And we are here now, and we're exceeding 99%. So the protection accuracy is up to 99% at least, and continue to increase. And that's with this with the long list of species that we're protecting for. So that's the that's in respects to our false negative error rates that I'm talking about. So that's the ability to protect and correctly identify the sensitive species that we're trying to protect. On the flip side of that, we have another error rate called the false positive rate, which is confusing a non-protected species with the one that's protected. And the impact that has is that you end up curtailing more often than you would normally for birds that are not sensitive, either because they're locally sensitive or endangered species, right? And that's of course important to a wind farm, but that its goal is to generate energy as much possible, efficiently, right? So that's an important consideration. And when we started, we were around 30% false positive rates. Now over here, we're less than 3%. So tremendous progress being made along the way of also expanding our ability to deploy in many different regions. We started with just Prairie Mountain region in Wyoming. Now we went to Tasmania with mountainous and forested terrain with tall canopies, and have evolved into all kinds of topographies and geographies that you can think of at this point. All right. I also mentioned the early on the importance of verification. So this green down here just highlights it's always been our company culture to be very open with our data and involve independent parties throughout the U.S. and Europe to review that data and assess the efficacy of the technology, and that's something we're very proud about because ultimately, we're trying to make a difference and we want to do the right thing, and so that's also that's been a very high priority for us all along. So I was going to switch over now to some live displays. Oh. Okay, one sec. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so let me go back here. So I'm replaying from a wind farm. This is a live operating wind farm. I'm just replaying data back from a few days ago, from actually January 11th. This is in California, where they have a resident population of golden eagles that hang out there, as you can see on the right. And so what this is showing is these, I can do the pointer here. These are turbines. The orange circles are IdentiFlight units. The circles are the 1 kilometer hemisphere I was talking about of detection. And what you see here is that there's a lot of overlap between these circles. The reason that's necessary here is because there's very pronounced topography, hills that can occlude line of sight. And so we have to put a higher density of units to be able to see around behind the hills and so on. Because we don't want to miss an incoming eagle, and we want to be able to have enough time to detect it and allow the turbine to slow down. That's an important thing I should mention. And I'll get to that shortly here. In some more our data that, with respect to curtailment of turbines. So what you see here is these red. When it turned red, it means we curtail the turbines. We detected these are eagles here. We detected the eagles and we curtail the turbines because of either they're getting too close or there's a potential collision course with those turbines. You'll also see all these other little green dots here for other species of birds for which we're not currently curtailing turbines. At this particular site, there's a high density of gulls because of the landfill over here. And so we get thousands of gulls going through here every single day. And this is where the false positive is so important, right? If we're, you can imagine a wind farm wouldn't be want to shut down turbines all day long for gulls that are very abundant. I mean, obviously, there's certain gull species that are protected in certain regions, but these particular gulls are very abundant. All right, so let me show you some other screens. So you can imagine that we're capturing tracks and data from these birds daily on the order of thousands of tracks. And each track is, what we mean by a track, it's a flyby. So we detect the bird, then we lock into it, we follow it, we determine the curtailment signal, and then it moves on, right? And each of those tracks may last anywhere from 10 seconds to minutes. And we are capturing, well, the system is processing 10 images per second and making all the decision making it's doing. So it's able to react and make a decision to curtail within 2 seconds on average. So it's very, very fast. Out of that data, we store these images here, about one per second, into our database, and that contains all the 3D positions in space, all the flight patterns, all these birds are being stored into a large database. And over time, you can start to, you have the ability to look at that data in many different ways to get an idea of how these birds are using the terrain. So this is a wind farm in Tasmania. So let me see if it shows. There we go. There's Tasmania. It's smack in the middle. Okay, let's zoom in. So what I'm showing you here is, what I'm trying to show you here is an activity heat map. So this is over a period of 30 days, the last 30 days of, and it's selected only for the protected species, which in Tasmania, at this particular site, we're protecting for the wedge-tailed eagle, the most amazing eagle you can think of. It's my favorite eagle. Very particular. And also the white-bellied sea eagle. And so what's really fascinating about this is that, so let me zoom in a little bit more. You can start to see the individual turbines here, turbine. What's fascinating about this is that it's when a wind developer is planning to develop a particular wind farm, they normally do an environmental impact study. They're looking for what is the bird activity at the site. They do surveys, and well, lately they've been starting to use IdentiFlight, but without IdentiFlight is folks with binoculars and sitting there and doing some sampling of activity. So you get, so they get some idea of activity, but when you put IdentiFlight at the site, you get thousands of tracks every single day, and you can really get a tremendous amount of information about what the activity, what the preferential use of the terrain is for these eagles. And this is what's quite unexpected, that you would get this tremendous level of activity right next to the shoreline of this lake. There's also, there's a 40-meter canopy height forest from which these turbines are here. These little dots here are turbines. They come out of the forest, and they're above the canopy by about 30 meters over the canopy. But if they had known about this, they would never have put them there. I mean, it's good to know that most developers, they want to do the right thing too. They don't want to get into trouble. They don't want to put this turbine somewhere that they're going to end up with all these incidents, right? Collisions. They don't. What's great is that more recently, in the last year or two, we have more and more developers are coming to IdentiFlight early on in the process to be more informed, and so that when they actually plan the location of the turbines, they take all these factors into consideration, which in this particular case, protecting for birds over a forest canopy is very difficult, because the bird can, luckily wedge-tailed eagles are not flying through the forest. They don't typically do that. But other birds, like red kites, for example, in Europe, they'll do that. They'll go into the forest and they'll come out and pop out. So that's difficult to protect because once they pop out, you have only a short time to be able to curtail that turbine and allow enough time to slow down, right? So those are very important considerations that we have learned through all this data capturing that's going on at all these wind sites. And it's just fascinating data. On this side, on the eastern side, there's some steep drop-off. Everyone expected that to be the highest use for the eagles. And they do use it, they love it because they get orographic uplift. So it's the kind of terrain that the terrain itself facilitates uplift for the eagles. And most of the birds that we deal with, raptors and large vultures, they really don't like to flap their wings. So they truly prefer that terrain over most any other terrain because they go hang out there in the morning, then the wind picks up, and then they just go and uplift, and they can do their circles and start doing their sweeps. But this was quite surprising. Now I think it's some number of those are the white-bellied seagulls, right? That you get white-bellied seagulls. They cannot do this. They sweep. They go up and down the coastline. It's really interesting, and they get into territorial fights with the wedgies as well. Let's see. So those are heat maps that show us, give us great insight about what the birds are doing at the wind farm, how they use the terrain. And let me show you on the screen here. One second. Just tons of data that when you look at data, what this is showing is day by day counts of detected tracks. The orange are for the protected species. In this particular site in Wyoming, they're eagles. The gray are other species, and you can see how there's migratory patterns here. In wintertime, you get a dramatic decrease of other species, and it's just what you're left over is a local population of eagles that resides there. It's actually only like 5 that stay through the winter. And then you get some migratory eagles come in later, as well as you get hawks and all kinds of other birds that move through the terrain. But of course, we find this all extremely interesting, fascinating data to be capturing. And let me show you. Okay, so curtailment. Of course, the key mission for IdentiFlight is to be able to shut down the turbine fast enough so that the bird can pass safely, right? So for every single curtailment, what I'm show you here is this is a plot over time for each turbine. This is the RPM, the revolutions per minute. So it starts at 10, 8 in the morning, and we detected bird. We curtail. You see the shutdown, the restart. Another bird showed up, we curtail again, restart, and so on. So we record every single event. We measure every single event, and whenever we detect something anomalous, like it took too long to slow down or anything of that nature, we generate alarms. And this happens every single day, every single hour of the day, and so that we provide that feedback to the site, the operators on site. To deal with any potential issue that might be going on with a particular turbine. So you can imagine that, this is, of course, our mission is right here. This is what our job number one is to be able to shut down those turbines and be effective at protecting for these bird species. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Susan now. She's going to talk all about birds. And to just give you some context here, keep in mind, 1 kilometer away distance in any condition, this is the kind of images that you're going to see, whether the systems capture, right? It could be a cloudy day. It could be a backlit day. The bird's against the sun. And so Susan will show you some examples of these sort of things and how our system is able to deal with them and still provide a high level of identification and accuracy. Oh yeah. Yes.
Excellent. All right, so that was the technology, now is the fun part. We're going to geek out over birds. That is a question at a lot of trade shows and a lot of things we get, and it comes down to the targeted curtailment, that these are all images from our systems of different birds around the world, and from this we can tell the difference between a honey buzzard and a common buzzard. Oh, that's an important thing. Buzzards in England or in Europe are hawks. So when I say buzzard, I actually am saying hawk, but they call them buzzards. So honey buzzard and common buzzard are hawks. Anyway. 31 species right now are what our systems are trained for and we protect for. We know our system knows more species than this because we need to know, like a common buzzard or a red-tailed hawk, to unfortunately not curtail for them. But this is our protected species list, and it is growing every time we put in a new site. We're going into South Africa this summer, and so we're going to have some more really cool birds. Oh my gosh. All right, so we started with, in the US with eagles, bald eagles and golden eagles. And we thought that was hard, because a bald eagle adult, very classic, but then the juvenile, it can be very different. It has white, it could be all dark, it could look like a golden eagle. And then the golden eagle juvenile with the white wing patches are completely different than the adults. And over time, our system is able to tell that all of these birds on the left are all bald eagles, all those on the right are golden eagles. Whether they look similar or different, our system has learned that. And so we would go into it saying, oh yeah, that's a gold eagle, that's a bald eagle, and we thought we were pretty good. Another species, a third species in the US that is protected are condors, California condors. So cool. So these guys fly way up high, way overhead. They're 400 meters above the swept zone of the rotors. So as of what we've seen now, these guys have been really far away. But we can tell these are 4 different individuals here. So we can, if needed, we could do some kind of behavior or survey or the different wing patches. And that is going to be really fun to really get to protect the condors because they are critically endangered. Some of our challenges. So the first photos were nice and pretty. This is more like what we get. We get butt shots and we get kind of, cloudy, blurry shots because there's haze, there's clouds, there's snow. So what we have here, the 3 on the top are all 3 different species and the 3 on the bottom are different species. The first one is golden eagle, then turkey vulture and raven. And so part of what we needed to do is go and figure out how to tell those apart. So a golden eagle, the one on the left on the top, it's got a big round body, really long wings. The raven on the other side has a big round body, but the wings aren't quite as long compared to the size of the body. And then a turkey vulture has more of a V-shaped body, partly because it's always looking down, and its little pokey beak is looking down, and so you usually can see its little pokey beak. So there's teeny little differences in this that we're getting really good at being able to tell the difference between birds that look very similar. So on the bottom, this is the golden eagle on the left, looking down something, so we can't see his head. And then normal turkey vulture behavior is, can't see its head because it's really small. So they're similar. They're in the turkey vulture, the wings, the wrists are bent back a little bit. And that's an important field mark of turkey vultures. They can straighten their wrists, of course, but if we see the bent wrist, then more than likely it's a turkey vulture. And then the raven, when they really want to be big and gigantic, they can look very similar to a golden eagle. They're just smaller. So that was some of the challenges we came across, is how do you tell the difference between these birds when they decide to look alike? And we have trained our system to do that, which is really cool. So, and this is where now we're being challenged. I thought I'd start with Uzbekistan because these are all our new birds that we're getting to learn, and they are so stinking cool. So steppe eagle, golden eagle, same as ours, imperial eagle. The top they're all dark brown birds. So if they don't have the sun on them perfectly and you can't see all the field marks, these are going to be really hard to tell apart. Golden eagle in the middle, long tail. Tail's about as long as the wing is wide. So if we see it has a long tail and we can tell, it's a golden eagle, we're done, we're moving on. If it has a short tail, well then it could be either a steppe eagle or an imperial eagle or a greater spotted eagle, which we haven't seen yet, but they will be there in the spring. And so then we have to go back and depend on other field marks. Coloration, the imperial eagle has the 2 white marks on its back in conjunction with other things that can be used as a determination. And if we can't see the tail, then it still could be a golden eagle. And so now we have all these 4 eagles that look alike. And one thing is these are all protected in Uzbekistan. So that we put them together and we say, well, this is an eagle. We're not really sure what kind it is. We're gonna stop the turbines for it anyway. So right now, my team, I have a team of classifiers that our job is to go through and tell the truth, that IdentiFlight gives us these images and we don't know what IdentiFlight called them. We then identify them and we're the truth tellers, and that's how we can tell how good IdentiFlight's doing. And then we create a huge data set of golden eagles and steppe eagles and we feed that into the system, and then it learns all the specifications of the eagle. As babies or youngins, they're really easy to tell apart. There's lots of good features. The golden eagle has the wing panels, and imperial eagles are really light underneath. So when we see the young ones, that's a lot easier. As soon as they turn into adults, they all start to look alike, unless we get some really good fun images. But we got really good fun images. New in Uzbekistan for us, bearded vultures and Egyptian vultures. Egyptian vultures are critically endangered, and they are super unique. So we should very easily be able to see them. We got a little bit of data in July and haven't seen them since, so hopefully they're coming back soon and we can get some more data with them. Bearded vultures, these guys are funky with their huge tails, and these guys are massive. They're about 2.5 meters wingspan, and in this first image you can see his little beard. So cute. And then we also protect for white-tailed eagles in Uzbekistan as well. And in Europe, we first encountered white-tailed eagles, and so we had a huge data set. We learned them, and so as we moved into Uzbekistan, right off the bat, we can protect for white-tailed eagles because we already have that data. All these new birds, we're collecting data right now and feeding it back into the system, and we're teaching it what all of these new birds are. Saker falcons are locally sensitive to the area. That's why they're on the list of birds that we are going to curtail for. They're about the size of a peregrine falcon. In bad lighting, they could be confused for a peregrine. It's okay, we'll deal with that and we'll curtail for both. But they're a very unique bird. They're very light. They have cool dirtiness under their wings. So when we can get good images, we can do it. And we actually have already trained for these. So our system that's running in Uzbekistan right now says, yep, that's a Saker falcon. Need to curtail for that. So that was one of our newest birds put into the system. One of my favorites is the short-toed snake eagle. Cool name. But also, look at all those stripies. That is the coolest bird. It just pops out. It's a stripies, it's got fingers and a hood, and it is so cool. This is another one we just got a glimpse of in the summer, and then they disappeared. And so they will come back here in the spring. We have a lot of work to do this spring when all these birds come back. And then we should also see booted eagles. So we're gonna learn about those. In Uzbekistan, they have vultures, big, gigantic vultures. So this was one that when we were talking about environmental studies, the one in the middle is a Himalayan griffin, a Eurasian griffin, Himalayan griffin, and Cinere's vulture. The developers did not know that Himalayan griffins were in the area. And so we found one, we found more than one. And so instantly that went on the protected list. They're like, that's interesting, oops. So we are protecting for both. These two first griffins are so similar. One is a lighter brown, the other is a little darker brown. There's different variations of both. So for the most part, we're probably going to just have a griffin, and it looks like a griffin, we're gonna curtail for it. So with enough data and enough practice, we'll be able to tell them apart, but to begin with, we're just gonna curtail for all of them. And then the guy at the end is the Cinere's vulture. These guys are huge. They can be over 3 meters in wingspan, and they're the classic vulture. They have the scary head, and they're pretty fun. They are in France as well, and so we're collecting data in France with the Cinere's vultures and the Eurasian griffins. Also, now we're moving to Europe. So white-tailed eagles. And what's interesting is white-tailed eagles are kind of like our bald eagles, and imperial eagles are kind of like our golden eagles, that they similar colorations, similar behaviors. So the white-tailed eagle, as an adult, big white tail, super short. So those are pretty easy to tell apart. Imperial eagle, same imperial eagle that we see in Uzbekistan. So we have a lot of data of that we can use in Uzbekistan. And then there's lesser spotted eagles. And one thing with them is they have the 3 spots. So they have 2 wing spots and 1 on their tail. And that's pretty indicative of a lesser spotted eagle and a greater spotted eagle, which we will see in Uzbekistan. But from what I've been told, we have very little chance of telling lesser spotted eagle apart from greater spotted eagle. Why these eagles choose to be so similar, just to confuse us. Cool kites, look at these. So these are red kites and then black kites. Red kites have this amazing red forked tail, 3 or 4 different colors underneath, gray heads. They are just fun birds to look at. Then the black kite is like a muted red kite. So it's not quite the forked tail, not quite the coloration underneath, but they often fly in mixed flocks. And so we'll definitely see both of those. And then just recently, ospreys became protected in Germany. So we are using our osprey data to protect them as well. And then some of the fun birds we get to see and protect, the Eurasian spoonbill. So these are black and white with a little bit of yellow. They are really cool. In the US, we have a roseate spoonbill in Florida. But these guys are all white. And then black storks, which look like they're wearing little tuxedos. Okay, so big tuxedos. These are actually very, very big birds. So these guys are all also on the protected list, and we get to look for them and protect them as well. Not quite as friendly are the harriers, because they all look alike. So we have marsh harrier, hen harrier, Montagu's harrier, and pallid harrier. In the US, we have northern harrier, which is kind of like the hen harrier, which is the middle bird there. That our harrier and the European harriers, those are similar. So there are differences, more white, less white, some striping, so we can tell them apart. The females are a little harder. Marsh harrier and hen harrier have 5 fingers. Montagu's and pallid have 4 fingers. So if we're lucky and we can see them and count the fingers, then we got it, we're on it. we can put those in buckets. Buzzards. So Eurasian honey buzzard. So cool. I guess, but from what I've learned, it's not a buzzard and it doesn't eat honey. But I think it eats bees, and that's where it came from on the honey buzzard. But super stripy, really fun, big long head, long tail. And what I have down here is a common buzzard. And so that common buzzard has the carpal patches, same as the honey buzzard. And our system can actually tell those apart. If some other systems, you might not get this, well, you don't get this kind of image, and you wouldn't know the difference between a honey buzzard and a common buzzard. But this is why IdentiFlight right here is because we can go down into the different plumages and tell you what kind of bird you're looking at. Kestrels are protected, and then peregrine falcons as well. And supposedly, well, no, not supposedly, the Eurasian bittern. Never seen one yet. They fly in the reeds. So if we see one, we'll protect it, but we haven't seen one yet. And then finally in Tasmania, Carlos's eagle, the wedge-tail eagle, similar to our golden eagle, and the white-bellied sea eagle, similar to our bald eagle. Massive birds, huge tails. It's the Tasmanian subspecies that is protected. These guys are pretty healthy on the mainland of Australia, and they do really well, but it's the Tasmanian subspecies that they're trying to protect. And they just have massive tails. They're gigantic birds. And then there's the white-bellied sea eagle with its really cool black and white. Really cool. So there's your bird geeking for the day. Love it. And that's all we have. Yay.
Okay, thank you so much. Awesome presentation. As I said, we have some time for questions. I'm gonna, when I come to you to ask your question, just talk into the mic. It's not gonna project, but it's just for the recording. Okay, questions. Rebecca.
Can you guys talk about how your system is getting ready to, or maybe already does, protect flocks of birds and small ones like passerines migrating during the day and at night?
Sure. So it's Pakistan as well. There are specific flocks that specific species of birds. The white-fronted goose is one example.
Greater white-fronted goose, yeah.
So if you remember the wide field of view cameras looking all around, they're keeping track of everything that they detect. So they actually have a count of how many birds are out there. While the stereo system will lock it into one, maybe a couple of birds at a time, right? And it has to switch between them. So we know that there's a bunch of birds, and then as soon as we identify one or two within that flock, we know what species are most likely to compose that flock. And there's a prescription that if it's more than a certain number, for example, in parts of Europe, is it more than 3 cormorants flying together, we curtail. Less, they don't. Well, it's what it, that's what it is. It's not our choice, but it's just what it is today, right? And ultimately, okay, so yes, so IdentiFlight can count the number of birds and identify enough members within a flock to be able to then make decisions on whether that's a particular species that needs protection.
And then small birds.
Well, the small birds, that's coming up because if you can imagine, the further away a bird is, the harder it gets to detect, and that's also directly proportional to the size of the bird, right? So in our V6 that you saw on that big slide I showed it earlier, we will this whole the suite of sensors are going to be all upgraded to improve the detection range for small birds for day and night. So it'll be essentially a fusion of sensors that can do night vision, thermal vision, and invisible imaging.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for your presentation and for your enthusiasm. I'm just wondering, what are like the typical rates of collision in a wind farm that doesn't have IdentiFlight technology, and how much of a difference does this type of technology make in the protection of these birds?
Sure. So the earlier on, I mentioned some of the studies. One particular study that was published 3 years ago did a multi-year study of IdentiFlight before and after, and also used a nearby wind farm without IdentiFlight as a control, and determined that IdentiFlight reduced fatalities at the wind farm. And this is compared to a human curtailment program. Before IdentiFlight, they actually had folks, crew on the wind farm that were looking for eagles, and they would manually shut down turbines to try to protect for the collision. So compared to that program, IdentiFlight reduced fatalities by over 85%. In terms of numbers, I mean, I think it's public record for the most part. So this particular wind farm in Wyoming, the worst year was 15 eagles.
15, 1-5. 15.
15 in 1 year. It is 110 turbines, so it's a very large wind farm. But obviously those numbers are significant enough for golden eagles, which their populations are certainly very sensitive in the winter.
Hey Carlos, could you turn your loud off? Thank you.
When a wind turbine is curtailed, how long does it stay off? And then, as we know, many of these birds will circle an area. And how does IdentiFlight deal with that?
So it varies quite a bit. So depending on the model of turbine, so some of the more modern turbines are able to slow down, usually shut down in about 15 seconds, while some of the older models can take 2 minutes. And so it varies very much with the model of turbine at the particular wind farm. But say for the fast responding turbines, we will actually track the bird, and as soon as we determine that it's out of the danger zone, we'll restart the turbine. And if the bird circles back, we'll shut it down again and repeat. And this happens often actually in Tasmania. The wedgies, they just love to fly, and they just do all kinds of maneuvers. So that'll happen all day. They'll curtail and come back, and we'll shut down the turbine every time.
How much does each pod cost?
Well, let me put it in this term. So the cost to a developer is less than 1% of the investment, the cost of a turbine. But the biggest concern for a wind energy producing plant would be how much is it going to cost me year over year and energy losses. And that is actually in this wind farm in Wyoming, it's actually less than 0.2%. So it's very, very manageable. There are other sites where you have a local population, resident population of eagles, such as the one in Tasmania. It's more like 1% because they live there year round, but that's more of a very highly active site with local population. So maybe that helps to give you an idea.
Well, I was talking about how much is each pod, how much does each
How does the system cost?
each camera system cost?
Well, I leave that to my salespeople, but
Okay. One last question is Izzo.
Are wind farms required to do bird protection? Like, are they all supposed to be curtailing for protected birds, or Or is it something that just some wind farms do?
So it varies quite a bit. So in the United States, eagles are protected. Bald eagles and golden eagles are both protected. And if you kill an eagle, you can be prosecuted and you can suffer some very severe fines if you're found to not to be delinquent and minimizing the risk of those eagles. So ultimately, that's how it works in the United States, is that you can get some serious fines. So the trend, the pattern you're seeing is that developers are now become in the past several years, it's become much more enforced, and Fish and Wildlife has actually been very, very active about it. And so that, and actually, I believe next week, that they're gonna publish a brand new rule from Fish and Wildlife that allows a better process for getting permits, so that there should be the obstacles for obtaining a permit for a wind farm. The importance of the permit is that it gives you some protection in case an accident happens, right? But you have to demonstrate in the application that you're doing something to prevent collisions, right? You're incorporating technology, or you're mitigating, you're avoiding, you're taking measures. So maybe that helps a little bit. But other countries is different. In Europe, what you see over the last 10 years is that wind development pretty much came to a standstill because, for the most part, particularly in Germany, is you cannot develop the wind farm unless you have a permit, and that permit must include a protection for environmental impacts. And there was no solution for protection of bird species there until recently.
Cool. Okay, last question.
I just wanted to build on. Does this work? Yeah. I work for Holy Cross Energy, one of the local electric utilities here, and we had a pretty large wind farm come online just in 2023. That's in Kit Carson County, and there's a lot of variability between the kind of difficulty or ease of the permitting process depending on the local government. And in this case, it was private land. Kit Carson County, not the most stringent when it comes to environmental regulations, but especially if you're trying to develop like close to a federal nexus, BLM lands or something, that can trigger the NEPA process, which makes it very, very onerous to like kind of provide, mitigation strategies, about environmental stuff. But ironically, the NEPA process is often used to just really slow the development of clean energy on the basis of, people's concerns about aesthetics versus, actual wildlife concerns. But happy that there's technology that's making it possible to make sure the path to clean energy doesn't, has minimized conflict with wildlife.
Very true. Yes, and that's if we could get the wind farms to be rewarded or to make it incentivize them, they would do it, because at the beginning, if they're building it, we don't cost anything. So, but after they're fined and then they have to go through the legal process and then put our systems in, it's a lot more work. So yeah, they could go in the beginning, which that's in Uzbekistan actually, that they are not allowed to run their turbines without us, and in Tasmania. That was part of the deal to build it, is they had to put us in, get us running, and then they can run their turbines. So we like that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carlos and Susan. Come back in 2 weeks for our next Naturalist Night, and grab an extra cookie on your way out.
Thank you.
Good job.